Wave of conflict across sub-Saharan Africa. How far has the adopted standby force gone in curbing violence in the region? We'll also be taking a look at how effective Nigeria's foreign ministry has been since the inception of this administration over 23 months in office. Recently, Nigeria's foreign minister, Ambassador Olugbenga Ashiru, adopted a smart mission policy. What does it really entail? And how would this one be different from other foreign missions Nigeria has had in the past? And how does it intend to drive the affairs of the ministry with 51 directors retiring by the end of the year? These and many more questions will be a poser to Nigeria's foreign minister, Ambassador Olugbenga Ashiru, as it comes on our hot seat. Join us in this interview.
Let's talk about this.
Now, let's look at the security issue within the continent in general. And the last AU summit where there was an adoption of a standby security force to tackle insurgency within the continent. How far has this gone in curbing violence and ensuring peace in Africa?
Yes, I must confess that this is still a challenge for us in the African Union. The ideal thing is to have this African Union standby force in place today. But unfortunately, we are still miles away from achieving that noble objective. Because if we have the African Union force already in place, what happened in Central African Republic wouldn't have happened. Because the African Union force will have been deployed fully to stop the rebels from advancing to take over the government in Bamako. So it is part of the agenda we are pushing at the forthcoming African Union that we must put in place urgently this case of African Union standby force.
Now, let's move on to consular matters now. There are strident calls by Nigerians that the Nigerian government and the Foreign Affairs Ministry is not doing enough to ameliorate the plight of Nigerians in distress and those living in diaspora.
This is a serious challenge to us in the Foreign Ministry. But we are doing everything possible to ensure that our missions abroad are able to be alive to their responsibilities to assist Nigerians who are in distress abroad. Recently, we had a strategy session of all our missions in the Asia sub-region, where we have the greatest challenge. All the heads of missions were invited to a seminar, and we strategized on how best to tackle this recurring problem. And a number of measures were agreed to take in the interim and long-term steps. In the interim, we've agreed that missions abroad should immediately engage their host governments to see how we could have a prisoner transfer agreement in place. We already have it with some countries. So we are trying to ensure that we can have it with as many countries as possible, so that those Nigerians who are in prison under this agreement could be transferred back home to come and complete their prison terms. But I must still go back to what I've said many times before. And we need the media to assist to educate our youths that they should not carry drugs. Because to me, it's like committing suicide. Because why should you carry drugs to Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand when you know clearly well that the punishment for carrying drugs to those countries is just death sentence? So why should you do it? So if we have that enlightenment campaign, it will help our work in the missions abroad.
You were quoted recently for adopting the SMART mission. What difference would this make? And would it be different from other regular missions abroad?
Now, some people, some commentators have in the past, recommended that if we continue to suffer from limited resources being allocated to the ministry, that we should consider closing down some missions. But we felt that, look, because we have the institutional memory of that service, the suggestions they put forward, we've tried it many times before, and it didn't work. And we felt that, look, we cannot be opening and closing missions. Because when you close missions, you spend money, huge money to close the missions. And when you open the missions, you spend huge money to close and open missions. And in any case, when you close missions, it doesn't translate into better funding. Because what government will say is that, look, you've closed down 10 missions, so they will also further reduce your allocation in the subsequent years. So you are back to square one. So what we have said that, look, don't forget that also, when you close missions, you lose friends. Nigeria, at the time we aspire for global leadership, we cannot be seen as losing friends. We cannot be seen as losing friends. When some other missions, when some other countries, even in Africa, are expanding missions, Nigeria cannot be seen as closing down. So we now said, look, let us have an ingenious way of, being prudent and saving costs. And we came up with the concept of smart missions. Smart missions means that in a particular mission, instead of having 3 or 4 officers, which means an ambassador and 3 officers from Nigeria, let us have only the ambassador who will be there. So which means immediately that if it's only one ambassador, so we are only responsible for the ambassador in terms of salary and emoluments, housing, and vehicles. So we take away 3 officers. So we save money on the rent we will have paid on those 3 officers. We save money on the cost of educating their children, and we are only there with 1 ambassador. It means that the ambassador will be doing the work of 4 people. But again, we are very careful that to ensure that we select an ambassador who is, for instance, very versatile and computer literate, because we'll have to do his report by himself. He will then be supported by a few local staff, because the local staff who are recruited locally, all you do is to pay them salary. You don't pay rent for their accommodation. You don't pay all those other things you will have paid for a local staff. And as such, the expenditure pattern drops dramatically. But it means that the ambassador is overworked. But it's good. We've started now, and it's working very well. So, gradually, also, we are reducing the staff strength in the missions abroad, all the missions. Missions that maybe their approved establishment is 10, we reduce to 8 to 7. So we shrink the size of the missions, which means that we spend less. Then the money allocated will now be enough to enable the mission perform all the services. We have discovered that in the past, what was responsible was also the overstaffing of missions abroad. So if we shrink missions, then the money allocated will be able to be spent judiciously and to go round.
But on the flip side now, what they might be saying, taking it from a layman's perspective, that not every friendship is productive. For instance, Nigeria cannot be seen cutting friendship with a terrorist nation. That may not promote our foreign policy objectives. So I believe what the callers of cutting down missions are saying is that let's cut down some of the missions that are not productive.
You see, you must understand that there's no country that will not have a value to you. There's no country that will not add value to you. And the value could be in various ways. Okay? When even you say a country is a terrorist nation, and you maintain relations there, at the height of that country having problem, it may be that your country will be called upon, since you maintain relations with them, to be able to talk to them, so that they will reduce tension, they will be able to come down to realities. It has happened before, whereby Nigeria has used its influence with some countries to ensure the maintenance of world peace and security. And I believe that those countries we are talking about, Nigeria can play a modulating role in curbing their excesses. Of course, Nigeria will not support openly a country that is threatening world peace and security. But we can use our influence on them to tell them that they must behave. They must behave and follow the right path, the right step to ensure that they become a responsible member of the international community.
Now, we understand that a large number of officers in the level of director cadre would be retiring from your ministry by the end of the year. So what plans do you have to fill in this vacuum and to ensure continuity in your ministry?
Yes, you are right. It is true that by January next year, we'll be losing well over 50 officers of the directorate level. This is a very large number. And these are officers who are well trained, experienced over the years, who have served their country at home and abroad, in far and near distant places. Really, I, as a professional also, will be sad to see them leave. But of course, we have no control over this because these are statutory regulations that must be complied with. But we're also lucky that because we take the issue of staff development very seriously. And we have been planning over the years to see, because we saw this coming, so we've been planning over the years to ensure that we can fill in the gap. And luckily last year, we also promoted quite a large number of officers to the directorate level. And I must say that the Foreign Service has the largest concentration of very experienced and well-trained officers, especially at the directorate level. And these are officers who are very hardworking, very efficient, who compete with the best abroad. They've been well-trained and they've seen it all. So those who have been promoted will be the ones who will take over from those who are leaving. But it's equally sad that at least you are leaving such a large group of officers in one swap. It's quite, a painful experience. But we are planning for it, and it will be smooth transition.
How would you describe the image of Nigeria in the eyes of the international community today?
The image of Nigeria, as you have said today, is very, very positive. You yourself can see in the last 1 or 2 years the influx into Nigeria of dignitaries, of presidents, of foreign ministers, of special envoys to come and consult with us. Only this year alone, you can know on record that the president of Indonesia has been here. The president of Lebanon has been here. The prime minister of Poland has been here. The French foreign minister has been here. A number of other special envoys and foreign ministers have been here. And just last week too, President Zuma of South Africa was here. So that shows you that Nigeria is well sought after, that Nigeria is well regarded, and that they regard Nigeria as a country they must come to come and consult us on regional and world issues. And also, you've seen that in terms of significance, we have recorded more inflow of dignitaries than even our own president has traveled outside just this year alone. So that shows you that we have very positive image. And also, I must tell you, in the last 2 years, we have been able to secure for Nigeria and for Nigerians 13 international positions to which Nigeria or Nigerians have been elected into in hotly contested elections that will vie with other countries, and we have triumphed. This has never happened before in the history of our country, because we know the records. In the last 23 months, we've secured 13 international positions. This is a record. It has never happened before. So it shows the high regard in which Nigeria is held abroad. Because before somebody can vote for you, it means that he has very high regard for you. And that is what has played out.
Recently, the president of South Africa paid a visit to Nigeria. Could you share with us some of the major highlights of President Jacob Zuma's visits?
Yes, he came to us apparently to consult with us. He traveled to 2 countries, Algeria and Nigeria. And he wanted to consult with us on what you have spoken earlier on, the need for a special AU intervention force in cases of crisis in any part of Africa. Because he felt that we are losing so much time in putting together this African standby force. And he felt that those big countries like Nigeria, South Africa, Algeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Kenya should be able to have that responsibility and trusted upon them by the AU, that in case of any crisis anywhere in Africa, we should be able to intervene quickly and rapidly on behalf of the African Union to save the situation. So this was one of the major highlights of his visit.
Now, finally, before we wrap it up in this edition of Network Africa, what would you describe as the greatest achievement of your ministry recently?
If I'm to catalog to you what we have achieved in the last 23 months, then I'll be here for a longer time. But I will try and sum them up for you quickly. That what we have done is to take Nigeria to a higher level. What we have done is to reposition Nigeria in the Committee of Nations. What we have done is to enhance the profile, image, and prestige of Nigeria. And we have demonstrated this by the number of Nigerians we were able to put in those international organizations, because they were elected in elections. They were not appointments, and you had to campaign for them to be elected. And they are key positions which we have gotten them elected into. Not only that, in the last 23 months, you can see the influx, as I've said, of visitors to Nigeria who are coming in, and also our own president being invited out. In concrete terms, through the instrumentality of our foreign policy, we've been able to attract a total of $9 billion in investments into Nigeria last year. And this is according to UN figures. And this is into various sectors of the economy. Not only that, we've been able to deepen relations between Nigeria and a number of countries, including US, Germany, Japan, South Korea, to mention a few. And we've been able to attract projects that will create wealth, employment for our people in this country. Procter & Gamble is investing billions of dollars in a factory in Agbara in Ogun State for health ways, they are going to employ many Nigerians to work in that place. It's going to create wealth. On Friday, we just opened a Chinese steel factory in Ogun State. And it's a multi-billion-dollar investment. It's just been opened by Mr. President on Friday. These are part of the investment that are flowing into the country. General Electric is also building a new factory in Rivers to be manufacturing gas turbines in the country. Gas turbines for power generation, not just for Nigeria, but for the African market. Not only that, I've just told you about what Germany is doing. Germany is very much interested in the power sector in Nigeria, and they are pumping lots of investment into the power sector. They've taken over the Gereku power plant in Kogi State, increased the capacity from 200 to 550 megawatts, pumping in lots of investment. They are going to do solar power stations for 6 universities across the country. 6 universities, solar power stations, 24 hours, 7 continuous supply. And this is like a grant to the country. And the universities have been selected: University of Ibadan, University of Sokoto, University of Yola, and Bayelsa. And we're adding 2 more. Not only that, they are going to do power station in Gombe from coal, clean coal energy power stations that will generate 450 megawatts of electricity in that part of the country. Apart from that, they are going to do afforestation in Ogun State and Cross Rivers, renewable energy source in the country. These are investments all coming into the country. These are the targets we have set for ourselves, because what we said is that we are going to use foreign policy to create jobs for our people, because we are mindful of the huge unemployed youth we have in the country. And we are using the instrumentality of the foreign policy to bring in projects, factories, programs into the country that will create jobs for our people. And we are already achieving success, huge success in this direction, as I've already enumerated to you.
Honorable Minister, it's been a wonderful moment having you share with us some of the strides in your ministry and also the government's efforts in establishing and expanding its influence in the international frontiers. Thank you very much for making it out on this edition of Let's Talk.